In my 40 years as a corporate fraud investigator, I learned that lies have a very specific texture. When a desperate executive is trying to hide millions in offshore accounts, their lies are frantic, sweating, and incredibly loud. But when a betrayal is born inside your own home, it doesn't shout. It whispers. It disguises itself in the quiet routines of a 38-year marriage, hiding in plain sight over morning coffee, or beneath the folded sheets of your shared bed. People often think monsters will break down your front door in the dead of night to destroy your life. They do not. Sometimes you hand them the keys, pour them a cup of chamomile tea, and kiss them gently on the forehead before leaving for the hospital. That bleak Tuesday morning in late November felt distinctly heavier than usual. The Seattle sky was a bruised, unyielding gray, weeping a steady, freezing drizzle that coated our suburban driveway in a slick layer of black ice. I stood in the ambient warmth of our kitchen, listening to the rhythmic, hypnotic drumming of the rain against the large window panes. My father-in-law, Elias, was scheduled to be discharged from a coastal medical facility 80 miles away after a devastating fall down his grand mahogany staircase. He was 92 years old, a man who had built a massive lumber empire with his bare hands, now reduced to a bruised and fragile patient waiting in a sterile hospital lobby. I poured dark roast coffee into a travel mug, the bitter, earthy scent filling the quiet room. My wife, Eleanor, sat motionless at the kitchen island, draped tightly in her thickest cashmere shawl. She held a cold gel compress against her left temple, her eyes squeezed shut in what appeared to be pure agony. A sudden, paralyzing bout of paroxysmal vertigo, she claimed. It had struck exactly 1 hour before we were supposed to leave to pick up her father. I can hardly keep the room from spinning, Arthur. She kept her voice fragile, barely above a whisper, pressing her pale fingertips into the cold granite countertop as if the entire house were violently tilting. I didn't argue. I didn't point out the incredibly peculiar timing. Just 20 minutes prior, her older brother Marcus had called to say his contracting firm was facing a catastrophic plumbing emergency at his new luxury site, making it impossible for him to drive. 10 minutes after that, her older sister Clara left a frantic voicemail about a sudden severe allergic reaction her youngest child was having. Within half an hour, an invisible epidemic of sheer convenience had completely incapacitated Elias's entire bloodline. "Just rest, Eleanor." I placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, feeling the rigid, unnatural tension beneath the soft wool. "I can make the drive up the coast alone. It is just a little rain. Thank you." She didn't look up, her gaze fixed entirely on the swirling steam rising from her untouched teacup. "Call me the second you have him in the truck. Don't stop anywhere else." I grabbed my heavy waterproof coat and walked out into the freezing deluge. The cold air stung my cheeks instantly, smelling sharply of ozone and wet pine needles. I climbed into my truck, the damp leather seats stiff and unforgiving against my back, and started the engine. In my line of work, you learn to trust your instincts when the variables simply do not align. The anomaly was glaring. Elias had spent 3 decades writing blank checks to cover Marcus's failed business ventures and Clara's endless stream of terrible investments. They were the most fiercely devoted children on earth when the old man had a pen in his hand. But the moment he was temporarily separated from his checkbook, trapped in a hospital bed with a fractured rib, they all vanished into thin air. I drove the 80 miles up the winding coastal highway, listening to the monotonous slap of the windshield wipers, actively forcing myself to ignore the cold knot tightening in the pit of my stomach. I told myself, it was just a bizarre coincidence. You do not interrogate your own wife of almost 4 decades. You do not audit the people you love. The hospital smelled exactly the way they all do. It was a suffocating blend of industrial bleach, boiled cafeteria vegetables, and quiet, institutional despair. I navigated the labyrinth of brightly lit corridors until I found the discharge lounge. Elias was sitting in a standard vinyl wheelchair near the nurse's station. He looked incredibly diminished. His skin was the color of old parchment, paper, thin and translucent, with a violent dark purple bruise blooming across the left side of his jaw from the impact of the stairs. His gnarled hands rested quietly in his lap. I walked up to the reception desk, shaking the cold rainwater from my coat. A middle-aged nurse with deep bags under her eyes pushed a heavy clipboard across the counter. "You must be Arthur." She offered a brief, sympathetic smile, handing me a plastic pen. "We are very glad you are here." We were getting a bit confused. Confused about what? I signed my name on the thick stack of medical releases, keeping my tone perfectly conversational and light. "His son, Marcus, called about an hour ago." She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice so the sound wouldn't carry down the hall. "He didn't ask how Elias was breathing or if he needed pain management for the ride home. He only wanted to know if Elias had signed any legal release of liability forms or if he had transferred medical power of attorney to the attending physician. He was incredibly aggressive about the paperwork." The plastic pen froze in my hand. A drop of black ink pooled slightly on the dotted line. The seasoned fraud investigator inside me woke up instantly, every sense sharpening into absolute, terrifying focus. Why would a son, allegedly too busy with a plumbing emergency to pick up his injured father, be aggressively probing a charged nurse about power of attorney documents? I didn't ask her for theories. I simply thanked her, tucked the discharge papers into my coat pocket, and walked over to my father-in-law. I grabbed the rubber handles of his wheelchair. He didn't speak as I pushed him through the sliding glass doors and out into the biting Seattle rain. We reached my truck in the sprawling gray parking lot. I carefully helped him stand. His joints cracked loudly, his breathing shallow and labored, as he leaned his entire weight against my chest. I guided him into the passenger seat, pulled the heavy canvas seatbelt across his frail shoulders, and closed his door. I walked around the hood of the truck, the rain soaking completely through my hair, and climbed into the driver's seat. The heavy metal doors slammed shut, sealing us inside a soundproof bubble that completely cut off the noise of the storm outside. I put the key in the ignition, the dashboard illuminating the darkened cab with a soft amber glow. "All right, Elias, let's get you back to your own bed." I reached for the gear shift. Elias did not nod. He didn't look at the wet road. Ahead, he turned his head slowly toward me. The fog of pain, the trembling frailty of a broken 92-year-old man. It all evaporated in a fraction of a second. His posture stiffened. He reached out with terrifying speed and clamped his hand around my right wrist. His grip was made of pure iron, his rough fingernails digging painfully through the thick, wet sleeve of my coat. "Do not take me home." His voice was a raspy, guttural whisper, completely stripped of any confusion. It was laced with a cold, undeniable terror. "Drive straight to Victor Thorne's office. Do not tell Eleanor, just drive." I stared at the old man, feeling the heat of his trembling hand against my freezing skin. The knot in my stomach pulled incredibly tight, snapping the last delicate thread of my peaceful reality. The lies were no longer whispering, they were screaming. I did not ask him why. In a corporate audit, when an informant slides a ledger across the table with trembling hands, you do not bombard them with questions. You secure the asset, you remove them from the immediate environment, and you wait for the adrenaline to settle. I shifted the truck into drive, my foot pressing heavily onto the accelerator. We pulled out of the hospital lot, merging aggressively onto the slick, rain-swept interstate, heading straight back toward the dense heart of the city. The interior of the truck was suffocatingly quiet, save for the rhythmic, violent slashing of the windshield wipers, cutting through the deluge. The amber glow of the dashboard illuminated Elias's pale, bruised profile. He stared straight ahead at the gray ribbon of the highway, his breathing slow and measured, his hands still gripping the padded armrest. So tightly his knuckles were completely white. He was gathering his strength. I kept my eyes locked on the road, my mind already calculating the horrifying variables. Marcus calling the hospital about legal authority, Eleanor faking a severe medical episode to avoid the car ride, Clara vanishing into thin air. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a perfectly synchronized, highly coordinated withdrawal. 10 miles down the interstate, the heavy silence finally broke. "It wasn't an accident, Arthur." Elias spoke without turning his head. The raspy tremor in his voice was entirely gone, replaced by a hollow, haunting emptiness. "My fall down those stairs. It was not a clumsy mistake." My hands tightened around the leather steering wheel until my own joints ached. I kept my voice incredibly soft, deliberately stripping away any trace of panic. "The paramedics reported you slipped on the top landing because the hall light was burned out. That is what Marcus told the doctors." Elias let out a dry, bitter laugh that sounded more like a painful cough scraping against his bruised ribs. "That is what Marcus told everyone, because Marcus is the one who turned the hall light off." Elias paused, taking a shallow, shaky breath. The sharp, earthy smell of the wet pine trees outside seeped through the air vents, mixing with the sterile scent of the hospital still clinging to his clothes. He closed his eyes, his iron facade cracking just enough to reveal the agonizing, bottomless betrayal of a father looking into the eyes of his own predators. "They came over last Tuesday night, completely unannounced," he continued, his voice dropping into a dull, flat monotone. "I was in my study, reading. Clara stood by the heavy double doors. She didn't say a word. She just stood there, blocking the only exit. Marcus walked right up to my desk. He was sweating heavily, smelling like stale whiskey and expensive cologne. He threw a stack of legal papers down on my reading lamp. It was an immediate transfer deed, he demanded. I sign over the entire 500 acres of the timber estate to him. Right then and there, he was screaming, "Arthur." He said he needed the land to cover a catastrophic emergency, something he couldn't hide anymore. I felt a cold, numbing sensation spread across my chest. "You told him no." I told him I would not surrender the legacy I built for this family to cover another one of his reckless gambling debts or whatever illegal scheme he was drowning in. Elias swallowed hard, a tear finally escaping his tightly shut eyes and tracing a path down the deep wrinkles of his cheek. I stood up to walk past him. I told Clara to move out of the doorway. She just looked down at her shoes. She wouldn't even make eye contact with me. Elias's voice began to tremble with a mixture of profound grief and boiling, unadulterated rage. Marcus grabbed my left shoulder. He didn't just push me back, Arthur. He shoved me violently toward the open door frame of the foyer. I lost my balance on the polished hardwood. I spun around, my foot missing the top step entirely, and I tumbled down the entire flight of the grand staircase. I hit the marble landing with a sickening crack. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move my legs. I was lying there in the dark, gasping for air, staring up at the top of the stairs. The interstate blurred slightly before my eyes as the horrifying image painted itself in my mind. And Arthur, Elias whispered, the sound completely devoid of hope. They did not come down. They stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at me in the dark. I heard Marcus tell Clara to grab the papers off the desk. Then I heard the heavy front door slam shut. They left me there, They drove away and called an anonymous ambulance from a gas station payphone, 2 towns over, to make it look like a tragic, solitary accident. They left me there to die on my own floor. The puzzle pieces in my mind snapped together with a violent, sickening force, the impact stealing the breath right out of my lungs. Marcus's sudden plumbing emergency today. Clara's fictional sick child. They were hiding. They were completely incapable of walking into a hospital to face the 92-year-old man they had nearly murdered. But the most devastating realization did not come from Marcus or Clara. It came from my own kitchen. The memory hit me with the brutal force of a physical blow. My wife of 38 years, Eleanor, the cold gel compress against her head, the dramatic refusal to get out of her chair. She had claimed the vertigo, hit exactly 1 hour before we were supposed to leave. I remembered the strange way she had been hovering near the landline telephone all week, the hushed, urgent phone calls in the hallway that abruptly ended. The second I walked into the room. The way she had meticulously organized our joint financial binders just 3 days ago, claiming she was simply doing some early tax preparation. Eleanor did not have paroxysmal vertigo today. She had a rock-solid, premeditated alibi. She knew exactly what her brother and sister had done to her father on that staircase, and she had chosen to stay completely silent to protect them. The woman I had built a life with, the woman who had kissed me softly just an hour ago, was actively complicit in the attempted murder of the man sitting next to me. She had stayed home because she knew I was supposed to deliver her injured father directly back to his empty house, dropping him right back into the waiting jaws of his attackers. She had left the front door wide open for the wolves, and she wanted me to act as the delivery service. The grief inside me instantly crystallized into something entirely different. The shock evaporated, burning away under a flood of cold, calculating, predatory instinct. In my profession, when you discover a conspiracy of this magnitude, you do not cry. You do not mourn the illusion you just lost. You start building the trap. I pressed my foot down hard on the accelerator. The heavy diesel engine of my truck roared, the vehicle surging forward through the heavy Seattle rain, leaving the hospital far behind us. "We are going directly to Victor Thorne's office," I told Elias. My voice dangerously calm, the words slicing through the quiet cab like a scalpel. "And when we get there, we are going to burn their entire world completely to the ground." The screaming lies of my family echoed in my mind as we navigated the relentless Seattle rain, moving through the city like ghosts in a submerged world. My resolve had not cooled during the drive. It had calcified into something hard and unforgiving. I pulled my truck into the damp, cavernous underground parking garage of a towering downtown high-rise. The subterranean air down there was thick, smelling heavily of stale motor oil, cold concrete, and standing water. Elias remained entirely silent as I helped him out of the passenger seat. His breathing was shallow but steady, his grip on his wooden cane resolute as his boots hit the wet pavement. We stepped into the private, mirrored elevator that shot us upward, leaving the dark garage behind for the 45th floor. Victor Thorne was not the kind of attorney who drafted simple wills for nice suburban couples over cups of warm chamomile tea. He was a corporate litigator, a legal shark who specialized in dismantling opponents methodically and utterly. When we walked into his massive corner office, the panoramic floor-to-ceiling windows offered a bleak, dizzying view of the gray storm actively swallowing the city skyline. The room was freezing, smelling faintly of expensive leather, sharp citrus cologne, and polished mahogany. Thorne stood behind his massive desk, an imposing figure in a charcoal bespoke suit, his sharp eyes calculating the exact weight and coloration of Elias's bruises before we even took our seats. He didn't offer empty sympathies. He simply walked over to the heavy oak double doors, twisted the brass deadbolt with a loud, final click, and locked us inside. "Marcus hasn't just been hiding from his guilt," Thorne stated, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that commanded absolute attention. He didn't sit down. He leaned against the front edge of his desk and slid a thick, beige manila folder across the smooth wood. "He has been exceptionally busy while you were lying helpless in that hospital bed." Elias. I reached out and opened the folder, my eyes scanning the dense, archaic legal typography. It was an emergency petition for a conservatorship filed with the county clerk just 48 hours ago. Marcus had stood before a judge and sworn under the penalty of federal perjury that his father was suffering from severe, advanced dementia. According to the fabricated document, the fall down the stairs was not an accident, but the result of a violent, psychotic break. But the single piece of paper tucked underneath the petition was the true murder weapon. It was a preliminary psychiatric hold, signed by a corrupt, out-of-network Dr. Marcus, had undoubtedly paid in thick envelopes of untraceable cash. Thorne laid out the mechanics of the legal ambush with chilling, surgical precision. If I had driven Elias back to his sprawling timber estate, or even to my own house where Eleanor was supposedly nursing her fake vertigo, we would have been driving straight into a federal snare. Marcus would have been waiting in the driveway with the police. He would have presented the signed psychiatric hold to the responding officers, and they would have had absolutely no choice but to comply with the medical order. They would be legally bound to physically seize a 92-year-old man, drag him out of his own home, and lock him inside a psychiatric ward under Marcus's absolute dictatorial control. Once Elias was heavily sedated and silenced behind padded walls, the judge would finalize the conservatorship. Marcus would then possess the legal authority to liquidate the massive 500-acre timber estate, completely erasing his father's legacy in a single afternoon. I sat frozen in the cold leather chair, the sickening reality of Eleanor's complicity washing over me in a second, suffocating wave. She was the anchor of this trap. The thought of my wife casually sipping tea in our kitchen while actively facilitating her father's kidnapping made my skin crawl. Her betrayal was the precise mechanism they relied on to deliver the target to the ambush site without any interference. But in forensic auditing, panic is the ultimate enemy of the truth. You must ignore the emotional hemorrhage and follow the numbers. I looked up from the documents, meeting Thorne's icy gaze. "Why the sudden, reckless rush?" I asked, keeping my tone perfectly flat. Greedy heirs usually wait for nature to take its course. They hover and manipulate, but they rarely risk federal perjury charges and false imprisonment unless there is a ticking clock. What is forcing Marcus to pull the trigger right now? That single question shifted the entire temperature in the room. I closed my eyes, letting my mind sift backward through the recent months of family interactions, stripping away the polite smiles and forced laughter at Sunday dinners. I was looking for the deviation from the baseline. And then the golden detail struck me. It was a late summer dinner party at my house, exactly 3 months ago. Marcus had arrived driving a brand new leased sports car, loudly boasting about a massive commercial real estate contract he had just secured. He was playing the role of the wildly successful tycoon. But right before dessert, he had cornered me in my dimly lit study. He reeked of expensive scotch and raw, sour panic. His face was flushed, sweating profusely despite the cool evening breeze blowing through the open study window. He had begged me for a $100,000 bridge loan in cash, claiming it was just a minor delay in his receivables. I had looked at his hands while he spoke. The man who supposedly just secured a multi-million-dollar contract had a violent tremor in his fingers, and the cuff of his custom-tailored Italian shirt was deeply frayed at the seam. A cash flow hiccup is never just a hiccup. It is a fatal hemorrhage. When I had calmly asked to audit his business ledgers before handing over the money, the desperate brother-in-law had vanished, replaced by an aggressive, defensive stranger who stormed out of my house. I opened my eyes. The grim mathematics of Marcus's life clicking perfectly into place, leaving a metallic taste of absolute certainty on my tongue. "He is completely underwater," I said to Thorne, the realization settling heavily in my chest. "Marcus is cornered by someone he cannot pay, and he needs millions of dollars in liquid cash immediately to save his own life." I looked down at Elias, whose bruised face was tight with sorrow, his eyes reflecting the painful understanding of his son's monstrous desperation. The enemy had laid out their masterstroke, believing they had successfully checkmated a frail old man and a gullible, retired accountant. But they had fundamentally miscalculated who they had invited to the table. If they wanted to play a game of numbers and legal traps, they were about to be audited out of existence. We could not go home tonight, and I knew exactly what I had to do next. The rain had intensified by the time we left the sterile, freezing confines of Victor Thorne's office, the heavy drops now beating against the truck's windshield like a drum. I could not take Elias to his sprawling estate and returning him to my own house, where Eleanor was supposedly suffering from her convenient vertigo, was completely out of the question. I needed a ghost room, an untraceable fortress, where the old man could vanish entirely from the public record while we dismantled his son's trap. I drove us to an upscale, extended-stay executive hotel located on the far eastern edge of the city, intentionally choosing a property tucked away in a quiet corporate park. There were no shared lobbies or nosy concierges, only private exterior entrances designed for absolute discretion. Leaving Elias resting in the locked cab of the truck, the engine still running to keep the heater blowing, I walked through the rain to the leasing office. The lobby smelled sharply of floor wax and stale coffee. When the young clerk asked for a name for the reservation, I didn't hesitate. I paid for an entire week in crisp, untraceable $100 bills and registered the suite under the name Arthur Pendleton, a quiet nod to my late college auditing professor. Marcus could scour every credit card statement and hotel registry in the state of Washington, but he would never find Elias. The suite was spacious and secure, with heavy blackout curtains that I immediately pulled tight across the large windows, plunging the room into a deep, muted dimness. The silence inside felt profound, a stark contrast to the storm raging outside. I helped Elias settle into a deep, overstuffed armchair near the small kitchenette. He leaned heavily on his cane, the yellowing bruises on his face looking stark under the warm glow of the single-floor lamp I had turned on. "You are safe here, Elias," I told him, keeping my voice low and steady. I placed a glass of water on the small table beside him. "No one knows this room exists. Thorne is preparing the medical defense to kill the psychiatric hold. You just need to rest." Elias looked up at me. His eyes, usually sharp and commanding, were clouded with a profound, lingering grief. The reality of hiding from his own flesh and blood in a nameless hotel room was clearly agonizing. "Thank you, Arthur," he whispered, his voice trembling slightly. "But what are you going to do now?" It was the question that made the blood run completely cold in my veins. Elias was safe behind a heavy wooden door with a brass deadbolt. But my part of this nightmare was just beginning. I could not stay in this hotel room. If I vanished alongside my father-in-law, Marcus and Eleanor would instantly know their trap had been discovered, and they would drastically escalate their tactics. I had to maintain the illusion of absolute ignorance. I had to go back to my own house. I had to unlock my front door, hang my keys on the brass hook in the foyer, and look my treacherous wife in the eye as if nothing had changed. I had to willingly walk back into the lion's den and sleep next to the enemy without revealing a single ounce of the cold rage currently burning inside my chest. I patted Elias gently on his uninjured shoulder, the rough wool of his cardigan damp beneath my fingers. Keep the chain locked. Do not answer the phone. I will be back tomorrow morning. I walked out into the cold, damp corridor, listening carefully to the heavy, satisfying click of the deadbolt sliding into place behind me. I walked back to my truck in the deserted parking lot. The storm was finally beginning to break, leaving behind an eerie, heavy mist that clung to the asphalt. I climbed into the cab and started the engine. Before putting the truck into gear, I pulled my mobile phone from my coat pocket. I needed absolute, undeniable confirmation before I crossed the threshold of my own home and destroyed my marriage. I needed to know if Eleanor was just blindly trusting her brother, or if she was acting as a fully conscious informant. I dialed my home number. I let it ring 3 times, taking a deep, slow breath to force my heart rate down before pressing the speakerphone button. "Arthur, where are you?" Eleanor answered. Her voice echoed loudly in the quiet cab of the truck. She sounded breathless, frantic. It was a masterful performance. "The hospital called over an hour ago, saying he was discharged, and you haven't answered my texts. Is my father all right?" I gripped the leather steering wheel so hard, my knuckles throbbed. I could hear the fake panic coding her words, but beneath it, I could detect the subtle, sharp edge of impatience. She wasn't worried about his health. She was worried that the package hadn't been delivered to the ambush site. "Calm down, Eleanor," I said, intentionally injecting a tone of exhausted confusion into my voice. "I didn't want to wake you if your vertigo was still bad. Your father had a dizzy spell on the interstate. I didn't think it was safe to bring him all the way home just yet." The line went completely dead for a fraction of a second. The silence was deafening. The trap was set. "Where did you take him?" Her tone shifted instantly. It was sharper now, the worried daughter act slipping just enough to reveal the cold calculation underneath. "I took him to the Pinecrest outpatient clinic on the east side of town." I lied smoothly, staring blankly out at the mist. "They want to keep him in a private room on the 2nd floor for a few hours just to monitor his blood pressure. I'm going to grab a coffee across the street while I wait." "Oh, Arthur, you should have called me immediately." She recovered quickly, her voice softening back into fake sympathy. "I'll stay here and rest my head, just keep me updated. Don't move him without telling me." She hung up. I didn't go home. I immediately pulled the truck out of the corporate park and drove toward the east side of town. The Pinecrest clinic was closed for the evening, its large glass double doors locked tight. The parking lot completely deserted and bathed in the harsh, jaundiced glow of the sodium streetlights. I parked my truck in the deep shadows behind an abandoned pharmacy across the street, killed the headlights, and waited in the dark. I sat in the chilling silence of my cab, watching the digital clock on the dashboard flip forward. The minutes dragged on agonizingly slow. I prayed foolishly that the parking lot would stay empty. I prayed that my wife of 38 years would not betray her own father for a brother who was drowning in debt. Exactly 17 minutes later, the violent screech of tires tore through the quiet night. A sleek black luxury SUV came tearing around the corner, hitting the curb hard before swerving violently into the Pinecrest Clinic parking lot. It was Marcus. He parked diagonally across 2 handicapped spaces and jumped out of the driver's seat. He was holding a thick manila folder in his left hand. The conservatorship papers, the psychiatric hold, the legal trap he had paid for. He sprinted toward the locked glass doors of the darkened clinic, yanking aggressively on the metal handles. When they didn't open, he pounded his fist violently against the glass in pure, unadulterated frustration. He pulled out his phone and furiously dialed a number. My own phone in the truck remained completely silent. He wasn't calling me. He was calling Eleanor to tell her. The bird was not in the cage. I leaned my head back against the cold headrest and closed my eyes. The absolute finality of the moment washed over me. There was no more room for doubt. Eleanor had taken the lie straight from my mouth and handed it directly to her brother in less than a minute. She was a fully active participant in the destruction of her own father. 38 years of marriage evaporated into thin air inside the cold, dark cab of my truck. I put the truck in gear, pulled quietly out of the shadows, and headed home. It was time to play the fool one last time. The drive back to our quiet suburban neighborhood was the longest journey of my life. Every red traffic light felt like an hour. Every passing street lamp cast a sickly, yellow glow across the dashboard. I was actively rehearsing the lie I would tell my wife, meticulously smoothing the razor-sharp edge of anger out of my voice. The house looked exactly as it had when I left that morning. A peaceful, two-story colonial wrapped in manicured hedges and soft, inviting porch lights. It looked like a sanctuary, but as I turned the brass key in the deadbolt and pushed the heavy door open, stepping inside felt exactly like walking onto an active crime scene. I dropped my keys into the ceramic bowl on the hall table, the clatter echoing loudly through the quiet foyer. Eleanor was sitting on the plush living room sofa, draped in her thick robe. A steaming cup of chamomile tea rested on the coaster in front of her. The lights were appropriately dimmed, perfectly playing up the narrative of her agonizing vertigo. When she saw me, she stood up quickly, pulling the robe tighter around her shoulders. Her face was a masterclass in wifely concern, her brow furrowed, her eyes wide and searching. "Where have you been? Why did it take so long?" she asked, her voice trembling with perfect pitch. "How is my father?" It was a flawless performance. If I hadn't just watched her brother, frantically pounding his fists against the locked glass doors of an empty clinic across town, I would have believed every single word she said. I took a heavy breath, deliberately letting my shoulders slump forward, channeling every ounce of genuine exhaustion I felt into my posture. "The drive was terrible, Eleanor. The rain on the interstate was relentless," I said, keeping my voice flat and weary. Then I delivered the lie Thorne and I had prepared. The doctors at the clinic decided to transfer him back to the main hospital for observation. They said, "His blood pressure spiked dangerously during the drive, and they want to run a few more tests just to be safe. We can't pick him up until tomorrow afternoon at the earliest." I watched her face closely. The relief that washed over her features was immediate, profound and utterly sickening. She let out a long, shaky sigh, placing a delicate hand over her heart. She said she was so glad they were taking good care of him, that it was always better to be safe than sorry. The ease with which she lied to my face was terrifying. She was relieved, because the delay gave Marcus another 24 hours to secure his trap. She thought they still had the upper hand. She offered to heat up some dinner, claiming her vertigo was finally starting to fade. I declined the food, telling her I just wanted to sleep, and walked past her up the stairs. We went to bed an hour later. The darkness of our bedroom felt suffocating, the air thick with unspoken betrayal. I lay on my back, staring blindly at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic, even breathing of the woman beside me. For 38 years, that sound had brought me comfort. Tonight, it made my skin crawl. In forensic accounting, patience is your greatest weapon. You do not rush the audit. You let the numbers settle. You wait for the room to clear, and then you strike. I watched the digital clock on the nightstand. Midnight passed. Then, 1 in the morning. I did not close my eyes for a single second. At exactly 2 in the morning, Eleanor's breathing deepened into the heavy, slow rhythm of genuine, deep sleep. I slipped out from under the covers with practiced silence. I didn't put on my slippers. I walked barefoot across the thick carpet, easing the bedroom door open and stepping out into the dark hallway. The house was completely silent, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs. I moved quietly down the hall toward Eleanor's home office. It was a small room at the end of the corridor where she managed the household bills, organized her charity committees, and, apparently, conspired against her own father. I closed the heavy wooden door behind me and locked the deadbolt. I did not turn on the overhead lights. Instead, I pulled a small pen light from my pocket and pressed the power button on her desktop computer monitor. The glow of the screen cast a pale, cold light across the room, illuminating the neat stacks of paper on her desk. Eleanor was not a digital security expert. She used the same password for everything: the year we were married, followed by our zip code. It was a password I used to think was charming. I typed it in and the desktop unlocked immediately. I pulled a specialized encrypted flash drive from my pocket. It contained the heavy-duty auditing software I used during my corporate investigations. I plugged it into the back of her computer and let the program run. This was not a quick glance at a browser history. This was a digital autopsy. I was going to carve open every single file, every hidden folder, and every deleted email on that hard drive. I began by pulling the bank statements first, matching the routing numbers of our joint accounts against any outgoing wire transfers. If Eleanor was helping Marcus, the financial trail would be here. Liars can delete their text messages, and they can fake vertigo to avoid a car ride, but they can never hide the math. The numbers were about to tell me exactly how deep this betrayal went. The auditing software took less than 3 minutes to bypass the basic firewalls on Eleanor's computer. I sat in the glow of the monitor, watching lines of data cascade down the screen. I started with the easiest target, our joint financial portfolios. For years, I had managed the aggressive investments while Eleanor handled the standard checking and the liquid savings. We had a mutual trust, a trust I was currently slicing open with a digital scalpel. I pulled up the transaction history for our primary retirement savings account. It was a high-yield fund we had been building since our late 30s. I ran a comparative analysis script, looking for hidden transfers masked as routine expenses. The software flagged an anomaly immediately. The screen flashed a bright red highlight over a series of sequential withdrawals that began exactly 6 months ago. $10,000 transferred out in April, $15,000 in May, $20,000 in June. The pattern was incredibly aggressive. I watched the numbers add up on the screen and felt a cold numbness spread through my chest. By the time I reached the current month, the total amount siphoned from our retirement fund was exactly $80,000. I traced the routing numbers attached to the outgoing wires. They were routed through a shell holding company, but forensic accounting is about following the ghost in the machine. It only took me 4 keystrokes to peel back the shell company registration. The destination account belonged to Marcus. I sat back in the office chair and stared at the screen, the pale light reflecting off my glasses. My wife had robbed us. Eleanor had quietly and systematically drained $80,000 of our hard-earned future and handed it directly to her brother. She had done it right under my nose while making me dinner and asking how my day was. But $80,000 was not enough to save a sinking ship. If Marcus was still desperate enough to kidnap his own father for a massive timber estate, Then the 80,000 was just a band-aid on a bullet wound. I needed to know what the bullet was. I pivoted away from the bank records and dug deeper into the local hard drive, my fingers flying across the keyboard in the quiet, dark room. The $80,000 I found was a hemorrhage, but it wasn't the fatal wound. I pivoted away from the bank records and dug into the local hard drive, running a deep recovery sweep on Eleanor's deleted files and empty recycle bin. People always assume that dragging a document to the digital trash icon erases it from existence. They never realize the ghost file remains until the memory sector is physically overwritten. The recovery software pulled up a buried folder innocuously labeled Charity Gala Planning. I clicked it open. There were no catering menus or floral invoices inside. The folder was packed with highly encrypted, scanned PDFs. I opened the first file, the imposing, official seal of the United States Securities and Exchange Commission filled my monitor, casting a harsh white glare against my face. It was a formal subpoena. I scanned the dense legal typography, absorbing the bureaucratic language that translated to absolute, undeniable ruin. Marcus had not just made a few bad investments. He had been systematically running a shadow ledger on a luxury commercial development, defrauding investors out of more than $3 million. The SC wasn't just asking questions. They were preparing a massive federal criminal indictment for wire fraud and embezzlement. I opened the next document, an email forwarded from a high-profile white-collar criminal defense attorney. The lawyer laid out the grim reality of Marcus's situation. He was facing up to 15 years in a federal penitentiary. The only way to stop the criminal prosecution and negotiate a civil settlement was to pay the stolen $3 million back in full before the indictment was formally unsealed. The $80,000 Eleanor stole from our retirement was just the retainer fee, to keep the defense lawyer answering the phone. But time was running out. Marcus needed $3 million in liquid cash to stay out of a federal cage. And there was only one asset in the entire family worth that kind of money: the 500-acre timber estate owned by a 92-year-old man who refused to sign it away. They didn't just want the land to get rich. They were going to sell their father's legacy to keep Marcus out of prison. I thought I had reached the bottom of the abyss, but then my cursor hovered over one final recovered document. It was a PDF titled Home Improvement Loan. I double-clicked it, the faint click of the plastic mouse echoing in the quiet room. The document loaded slowly. It was a second mortgage agreement on our house. The home we had completely paid off a decade ago. I scrolled down to the signature line. There, in crisp black ink, was my own forged signature, right next to Eleanor's perfectly legitimate one. She hadn't just drained our future. She had actively gambled the roof over my head to save a federal criminal. The faint, lingering scent of her lavender hand cream on the keyboard suddenly hit my throat, making me violently nauseous. I unplugged the flash drive, slipped it back into my pocket, and shut down the computer. The screen went black, plunging the office back into total darkness. The silence of the house felt entirely different now. It was no longer a sanctuary. It was a holding cell. I sat in the pitch black for a long time, letting the magnitude of the betrayal completely freeze the blood in my veins. I didn't feel the urge to scream or break the monitor. When you understand exactly how the enemy operates, the anger crystallizes into something much more dangerous: pure, absolute focus. I walked quietly back down the hallway, slipping into the cold space beside my wife. I closed my eyes and waited for the sun. Morning arrived entirely too fast, the gray Seattle light creeping under the window blinds. I had not slept a single minute. I sat at the kitchen island, staring into a mug of black, bitter coffee, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. Upstairs, Eleanor was getting out of bed, running the shower, probably rehearsing her next lie in the bathroom mirror. I knew exactly what was coming today. When you expose desperate people to the light, they usually run, but when you trap them, they attack. At exactly 8:15, the heavy brass knocker on my front door slammed 3 times. It was not the polite, hesitant knock of a delivery driver or a neighbor. It was the hard, authoritative strike of law enforcement. I took a slow sip of my coffee, set the ceramic mug down on the granite counter, and walked down the hallway. I didn't rush. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the heavy oak door open. The biting morning air rushed in, chilling my bare arms. Standing on my front porch was a young, stern-faced police deputy, his right hand resting casually on his utility belt, but he wasn't the one I was looking at. Standing directly behind the uniform were Marcus and Clara. Marcus looked terrible. The confident, wealthy contractor facade was completely gone. His face was pale and unshaven, his eyes bloodshot, vibrating with nervous, cornered energy. Clara stood slightly behind him, clutching her expensive leather purse tightly against her chest like a shield, her eyes darting nervously around my yard. "Good morning, sir. Are you Arthur?" The deputy tipped his hat politely, his voice all business. I nodded, keeping my hands visible and relaxed at my sides. "I am. How can I help you, officer?" Before the deputy could speak, Marcus pushed his way forward, brandishing a crumpled stack of legal papers. "Where is my father?" he demanded, his voice loud and erratic, echoing down the quiet suburban street. "What did you do with him, Arthur?" "We know you didn't leave him at the clinic. You kidnapped him." The word hung heavily in the crisp morning air. Kidnapping. It was a dangerous, loaded word meant to force the deputy's hand. I didn't flinch. I simply looked at Marcus with the exact same detached, clinical calculation I used to audit fraudulent ledgers. The deputy held up a hand, physically stepping between us. "Sir, step back," he warned Marcus firmly. He turned back to me, his expression professional but tense. "Arthur, your brother-in-law has filed an emergency missing persons report, along with a preliminary conservatorship order. He claims his father was discharged into your care yesterday and hasn't been seen since. He also has a medical hold stating the man suffers from severe dementia and requires immediate psychiatric evaluation." I listened to the words, feeling a profound sense of disgust. Marcus was really going to do it. He was willing to have his own father locked in a padded room today just to save himself from a federal cage. Just then, I heard the soft padding of footsteps on the stairs behind me. Eleanor walked into the foyer, tightening her thick robe around her waist. She looked from the deputy to her brother, and then to me, her face contorting into a mask of pure, frantic confusion. "Arthur, what is going on?" she gasped, her voice trembling perfectly. "Marcus, what are the police doing here?" Marcus looked at his sister with wide, desperate eyes. "He took Dad, Eleanor. He hid him. We have the court order to take custody before Arthur gets him hurt." Eleanor covered her mouth with both hands, letting out a choked sob. She turned to me, her eyes brimming with flawless, unshed tears. "Arthur, tell them where my father is. You said he was at the hospital. Why would you lie to me?" Her performance was absolute perfection. If I hadn't spent the entire night reading her deleted emails and tracing the forged signature on our second mortgage, I would have dropped to my knees and apologized for worrying her. The timing of her entrance, the pitch of her voice. She played the distraught, innocent wife flawlessly. The deputy looked at the papers, then looked at me, his hand resting heavier on his belt. "Arthur, if you are harboring a vulnerable adult against a lawful medical order, you are committing a felony. I need to come inside, and I need to search this house right now." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply took a step back on the cold hardwood floor and pulled the door completely open, preparing to drop the first match into their gasoline-soaked world. "Come inside, officer," I said, my voice perfectly level, stepping aside to clear the threshold. "You won't need to search the upstairs bedrooms because my father-in-law is not in this house. But before you take another step, I have something you absolutely need to see." Marcus pushed past the deputy, his face flushed with a sickening kind of triumph. He marched into my living room, as if he already owned the property, with Clara following closely behind, like a frightened shadow. Eleanor hovered near the hallway arch, clutching the thick fabric of her robe, her eyes darting between me and the police officer, still playing the role of the terrified wife caught in a sudden tragedy. I didn't let their frantic energy rush me. I walked calmly over to the mahogany coffee table and picked up my digital tablet. I had synced it with Victor Thorne's secure cloud server at 4 a.m. for exactly this moment. I unlocked the screen, swiped to the video file, and handed the tablet directly to the deputy, completely ignoring my brother-in-law. "Officer," I said quietly, the stillness of the room amplifying my words, "the paperwork that man just handed you is based on absolute perjury. He is lying to law enforcement to facilitate a massive financial crime. Please, watch this video." The deputy looked highly suspicious, but he held the tablet up and tapped the play button. I had turned the volume all the way up so the sound would carry perfectly through the quiet house. On the bright screen, Elias sat in the high-backed leather chair in Thorne's office. The stark office lights illuminated the dark purple bruising on his jaw, but his eyes were brilliant and fiercely focused. He stated his full legal name, his date of birth, and yesterday's exact date and time. Then, with a voice that didn't shake for a single second, he stated for the legal record that he was of entirely sound mind and body. "I am currently in hiding." Elias's raspy voice echoed through my living room. "I am hiding because my son, Marcus, and my daughter, Clara, physically assaulted me in my own home, attempting to force me to sign away my estate. They left me injured on the floor and abandoned me. I have retained legal counsel, and I am formally requesting an emergency restraining order against my son." The color drained completely out of Marcus's face. The smug, victorious smirk vanished in a fraction of a second, replaced by pure, feral panic. He lunged toward the deputy, reaching blindly for the tablet. "That's a deep fake. It's manipulated," he shouted, his voice cracking. He forced a sick old man to read a script. The deputy stepped backwards swiftly, dropping his hand heavily onto the butt of his service weapon. He delivered a hard, commanding look that stopped Marcus dead in his tracks. "Sir, back away right now," the deputy ordered, his voice leaving absolutely no room for negotiation. The deputy the tablet back to me. He looked down at the crumpled conservatorship papers in Marcus's hand with clear, professional disgust. "You told my dispatch you had a missing vulnerable adult suffering from a severe psychological break. That video shows a perfectly lucid man retaining legal counsel for domestic abuse. This is a civil matter, and frankly, you are dangerously close to catching a felony charge for filing a false police report. I strongly suggest you leave this property before I decide to make an arrest." The deputy didn't wait for a response. He turned around, walked out the front door, and pulled it shut behind him with a heavy final click. The moment the lock engaged, the delicate illusion of family civility completely evaporated. The house descended into madness. Marcus lost whatever was left of his sanity. He screamed, the veins bulging visibly in his neck, kicking the heavy oak coffee table so hard the wood splintered. He called me a thief, a manipulator, a pathetic bean counter trying to steal his inheritance. Clara backed away against the wall, her hands covering her mouth, terrified of her brother's violent explosion. But it was Eleanor who finally broke. My wife stopped crying. The fake tears dried up instantly, replaced by a mask of sheer, unadulterated venom. She stepped out of the hallway, dropped her hands from her face, and stood shoulder to shoulder with her brother. "Stop this right now, Arthur," Eleanor screamed, her voice shrill and desperate, entirely devoid of the frail vertigo act. "You have no right to interfere with my family. Give us the land." I looked at the woman I had shared a bed with for 38 years. I didn't raise my voice. The silence I maintained was far more oppressive than her screaming. "Did you know he was facing federal prison for wire fraud, Eleanor?" I asked softly. "Did you know your father was lying on the hardwood floor in agony while you faked a migraine upstairs?" Eleanor didn't deny a single thing. She didn't express a shred of remorse for her father's suffering. Instead, she pointed a trembling finger directly at my chest. "It is his land," she shouted, her voice echoing off the walls of the house we had bought together. "It belongs to us, not you. Marcus is going to go to federal prison. You don't understand what is at stake here. You just need to step aside and let us fix this." She was actively justifying the destruction of her own father to save a criminal. She was telling me to my face that my moral compass meant absolutely nothing compared to her brother's survival. The woman standing in my living room was totally and irrevocably lost to me. In forensic accounting, when the audit is complete and the fraud is fully exposed, you do not stand around debating the embezzler. You pack up your briefcase and leave. I turned my back on my wife and her brother. I walked calmly up the stairs to the master bedroom. The air up there felt stale, smelling faintly of her expensive perfume. I pulled a heavy leather suitcase from the top shelf of the closet and began throwing my clothes into it. I didn't bother folding anything. I grabbed my passport, my personal financial ledgers, and the encrypted flash drive containing the digital autopsy of Eleanor's crimes. I zipped the suitcase shut and walked back down the stairs. Marcus was pacing like a caged animal in the foyer, muttering frantically to Clara about finding a new judge and filing a different appeal. Eleanor stood by the front door, her arms crossed tightly, her face hard and defiant. She thought I was retreating. She actually believed the pressure had finally broken me, and I was stepping aside just like she had demanded. I stopped in front of her. I looked into her, cold, calculating eyes for the very last time. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't tell her I wanted a divorce or that I knew about the forged second mortgage. Words were completely useless now. I simply adjusted my grip on the handle of my suitcase, walked past her, and pushed the front door open. The biting morning air hit my face, sharps and clean. I threw my bag into the truck and drove away, without looking back in the rearview mirror. The lines were permanently drawn, and I was going to war. I drove straight from the suburban house I had just abandoned and headed back into the city. I didn't turn on the radio. The heavy, pressurized silence in the cab of my truck gave me the space I needed to compartmentalize the total destruction of my 38-year marriage. I pulled into the underground parking garage of the extended stay hotel and went directly up to the suite where I had hidden Elias. When I unlocked the door, Victor Thorne was already sitting at the small dining table, his laptop open, typing furiously. Lawyers like Thorne do not wait for the dust to settle. They build bunkers while the bombs are still falling. Elias was sitting in his armchair, drinking a cup of hot Earl Grey tea. He looked significantly more rested than he had the day before. Thorne closed his laptop and looked up. He didn't ask how things went at the house. The simple fact that I was standing there, holding a packed leather suitcase, told him everything he needed to know about my wife and her siblings. "We have a problem," stated, getting straight to business. The deputy walking away this morning bought us a little time, but it did not kill the legal order. Marcus still has that fraudulent psychiatric hold floating around. He is cornered by the SC. He is going to find a judge desperate or corrupt enough to sign a bench warrant if we do not neutralize his medical claim immediately. I set my suitcase down by the door. How do we kill it? Thorne smiled. A cold, deeply calculating expression. We don't just kill it, we obliterate it. Over the next 3 hours, the luxury hotel suite was transformed into a high-level medical clinic. Thorne hadn't just been typing emails, he had been calling in massive favors. If Marcus wanted to play dirty by paying off a shady, out-of-network doctor, Thorne was going to crush him with absolute, undeniable prestige. One by one, 3 different doctors arrived at the hotel. They were not random general practitioners. They were board-certified geriatric psychiatrists. One was the head of neurology at the State University. Another was a leading expert in cognitive decline who regularly testified in federal court. Thorne had hired all 3 independently to ensure there could be absolutely no claims of bias or collusion. They evaluated Elias one at a time behind the closed doors of the suite's bedroom. I paced the floor of the living room, feeling a slight, persistent twinge of anxiety. Elias was 92 years old. He had just survived a brutal physical assault and a terrifying hospital stay. The stress alone would be enough to make anyone stumble over a few complex questions. If he faltered, if he showed even a shadow of confusion, Marcus could use it to drag this out in probate court for years. The third and final doctor stepped out of the bedroom just after lunchtime. She was a stern-looking woman with gray hair pinned tightly back. She closed the door quietly, walked over to Thorne, and signed the thick stack of legal affidavits he had prepared. She looked at me and offered a warm, genuine smile. "Your father-in-law is one of the sharpest men I have evaluated this year," she said. "His cognitive function is exceptional." He recounted the details of his assault with perfect sequential clarity. He understands exactly what his son is trying to do. The relief was overwhelming. 3 independent specialists had just legally sworn under penalty of perjury that Elias was in full possession of his mental faculties. Thorne slid the documents into his briefcase. "The fake Dr. Marcus paid off is neutralized," Thorne announced. "If Marcus tries to present his medical hold now, I will bury him under a mountain of expert testimony. In fact, I am sending copies of these evaluations directly to the medical board. His doctor will lose his license by Friday." Late that afternoon, I left the safety of the hotel suite to gather some basic necessities for Elias: soft foods, extra water, and toiletries. I chose a large, sprawling grocery store several miles away, intentionally picking a location where it was easy to blend in. I navigated the aisles methodically, the mundane nature of grocery shopping feeling completely surreal. My family was actively collapsing under the weight of federal wire fraud and elder abuse. Yet here I was, comparing the sodium content in canned soup. I paid in cash and walked out through the automatic sliding doors. The evening air was turning sharply cold, the sky darkening into a deep bruised purple. I walked toward my truck, parked under a flickering halogen light near the back of the lot. Before my fingers even touched the door handle, the roaring sound of a heavy diesel engine tore through the quiet lot. A massive, lifted black pickup truck swerved around the corner of the building at an alarming speed. It cut diagonally across the empty spaces and slammed on the brakes, stopping just inches from my rear bumper, completely pinning my vehicle against the concrete median. The driver's side door swung open, and Vance stepped out. Vance was Clara's husband. a local contractor who specialized in cheap commercial remodels and cutting corners. He was exactly the kind of man who thought sheer physical aggression was an adequate substitute for intelligence. He wore stained work boots and a heavy canvas jacket, his face flushed red with anger. He marched toward me with heavy stomping steps. I didn't back away. I stood my ground next to my truck door. Vance stopped less than 2 feet away, invading my personal space. Puffing out his chest, he pointed a thick, calloused finger directly at my face. "Where is the old man, Arthur?" Vance barked, his voice echoing across the empty asphalt. "You think you're so smart hiding him away. Clara is an absolute wreck. You need to tell me exactly where you stashed him right now." I looked at him with an entirely blank expression. I didn't say a word. I simply let the silence hang in the freezing air. My silence infuriated him. Vance took another step forward, slamming his heavy hand flat against the window of my truck door, leaning his entire body weight toward me. "You don't understand what's happening," Vance growled, dropping his voice into a menacing whisper. "Marcus used my business as collateral for one of his bridge loans. If that timber estate doesn't sell, the bank is going to take my company and my house. You are getting between desperate people and their survival. Accidents happen to people who get in the way. You need to walk away before someone gets seriously hurt." It was a textbook, undeniable threat of physical violence. He waited for me to flinch. He wanted to see fear in my eyes so he could report back to Marcus that the accountant had finally cracked. Instead, I shifted my gaze slightly past Vance's shoulder, looking through the windshield of my truck. Mounted directly behind the rearview mirror was my high-definition, motion-activated dash camera. The tiny, steady red light was blinking in the darkness. The sensitive internal microphone was capturing every single threatening word he had just delivered. I looked back at Vance, feeling a deep, profound sense of satisfaction. "Are you finished, Vance?" I asked calmly, my voice showing absolutely zero intimidation. Vance blinked, clearly thrown off balance. He sneered, pulled his hand off my window, and stomped back to his truck. He threw it in reverse and sped out of the parking lot. I calmly climbed into my cab, synced the camera to my phone, and watched the high-definition video file upload securely to my cloud server. I had gone to the store for soup. I was leaving with felony criminal intimidation captured in crystal clear audio and video. I drove back to the hotel with the dashcam footage safely uploaded to the cloud server. The adrenaline from the parking lot encounter was slowly fading into a sharp, icy focus. I walked into the luxury suite and found Thorne still working at the dining table. Elias was resting on the sofa, his eyes closed but his breathing steady. I didn't say a word. I simply placed my tablet on the table in front of the lawyer and played the video of Vance threatening me. Thorne watched the heavy contractor slam his hand against my truck window and deliver a blatant threat of physical violence. A slow, deeply satisfied smile spread across the lawyer's face. We finally had the criminal intimidation. We needed to prove Marcus was running a syndicate of desperation. But Thorne knew that desperate men do not stop just because they are on camera. Marcus was backed into a corner by the federal government. The emergency court hearing for the conservatorship was looming only a few days away. Thorne leaned back in his chair and explained the harsh reality of the legal system. Even with our medical evaluations and the dashcam video, walking into a probate courtroom is always a massive risk. A sympathetic judge might look at a 92-year-old man and grant a temporary guardianship just to exercise extreme caution. We could not afford any caution. We needed Marcus to voluntarily cancel his own petition before we ever stepped foot inside a courtroom. "The only way a starving predator drops his weapon," Thorne said, his voice low and calculating, as if you hand him a piece of meat. We needed to give Marcus exactly what he wanted, or at least the absolute illusion of it. We sat around the heavy wooden table and drafted a document. It was not a real, legally binding contract. It was a highly sophisticated piece of psychological warfare disguised as a formal settlement agreement. Thorne used all the dense, archaic legal jargon necessary to make it look completely authentic. The fake document told a very specific story. It was drafted to look like the desperate surrender of a terrified, exhausted old man. The terms explicitly stated that Elias was willing to immediately transfer the entire 500-acre timber estate directly into his son's name. In exchange, Marcus simply had to drop the emergency conservatorship, cancel the psychiatric hold, and agree to a permanent no-contact order. I read over the printed draft. It was brilliant. It made it look like the parking lot threat from Vance had actually worked, and that I was begging for a way out just to protect my own physical safety. But Thorne reminded us of the most critical step. We could not hand this document to Marcus or his attorneys directly. If a shark like Thorne willingly handed over a complete surrender, Marcus would immediately suspect a trap. The document had to be leaked. It had to come from a weak link in our armor. I told Thorne. I would be the weak link. I needed to deliver this bait directly to Eleanor. The next morning, I drove to a quiet coffee shop on the edge of our suburban neighborhood. I sat in a secluded corner booth and called my wife. She answered on the second ring, her voice cold, guarded, and laced with hostility. I kept my voice incredibly low, intentionally injecting a slight tremor into my words. I told her I was tired. I told her the stress was becoming entirely too much, and that I just wanted this nightmare to end. I asked her to meet me in public so we could negotiate a truce. 20 minutes later, Eleanor walked into the coffee shop. She wore large, dark sunglasses, her posture rigid and defensive. She sat across from me, crossing her arms tightly over her chest. She didn't order a drink. She just stared at me, waiting for my absolute surrender. I looked down at my hands, playing the part of a man who had lost his will to fight. I told her that Vance had threatened me in a grocery store parking lot. I told her Elias was terrified of what Marcus might do next, and that his health was failing under the stress. I slid the thick manila folder across the small wooden table. I told her this was a preliminary draft. Thorne drew up to make the harassment stop. Eleanor opened the folder. Her eyes quickly scanned the heavy legal text. I watched her face closely. For a brief second, the cold, angry mask slipped completely. Her eyes widened as she read the terms of the agreement: the 500-acre estate, immediate transfer, total surrender. A greedy, triumphant light sparked in her eyes. She was looking at her brother's salvation from federal prison and her own personal vindication. I told her Elias would sign the final copy on Friday. But I made my one condition very clear. Marcus had to formally cancel the emergency psychiatric hold and withdraw the conservatorship petition first. I told her I would not let her father sign anything while there was a threat of a police raid hanging over his head. Eleanor closed the folder and slid it deep into her designer purse. She looked at me with a sickening mixture of pity and absolute triumph. She actually reached across the table and patted my hand. She told me I was doing the right thing, that it was better for everyone this way, and that she would make sure Marcus called off his lawyers. She stood up and walked out of the coffee shop, practically running to her car to call her brother. The bait had been taken. On Thursday morning, the waiting finally came to an end. We were sitting in the hotel suite when Thorne suddenly closed his laptop and let out a sharp, genuine laugh. He turned his monitor toward me and Elias. It was an official automated notification from the county clerk's office. Marcus had just instructed his legal team to formally withdraw the emergency petition for conservatorship. The psychiatric hold was officially canceled. Marcus had traded his only weapon for the promise of a massive payday. 10 minutes later, my phone vibrated. It was Eleanor. Her tone dripped with condescending warmth. She told me Marcus had agreed to my terms. She then delivered the final piece of the puzzle. Marcus wanted to finalize the transfer immediately. He had booked a private boardroom, a massive, glass-walled suite on the top floor of his own commercial contracting firm, for Friday morning at 9 sharp. He wanted to look his father in the eye and watch him sign the physical deed on his own turf. I agreed to the time and location. I hung up the phone and looked across the room at Thorne. The profound arrogance of my brother-in-law was staggering. He had chosen the glass boardroom of the very company he was using to commit federal wire fraud as the stage for his ultimate extortion. He thought he was booking his victory lap. He had no idea he was booking the exact location of his own absolute destruction. The glass-walled boardroom on the top floor of Marcus's commercial contracting firm was designed specifically for intimidation. The air conditioning was cranked so high, it felt like a meat locker, smelling sharply of ozone and freshly brewed espresso. Through the panoramic floor-to-ceiling windows, the Seattle skyline loomed, still wrapped in a lingering, damp gray mist. We walked through the heavy double doors, the rubber tips of Elias's cane echoing sharply against the polished marble floor. Marcus sat at the head of the massive, custom-built conference table. He was wearing a flawless charcoal bespoke suit, his hands steepled confidently in front of him. The desperate, frantic animal who had screamed on my front porch just a few days ago was entirely gone. Beside him sat Clara and Vance, looking like the anxious courtiers of a newly crowned king. Eleanor sat on his left, her hands folded neatly over her designer purse. She looked at me with a sickening expression of condescending pity. She genuinely believed she had successfully navigated a family crisis, keeping her criminal brother out of federal prison while forcing her foolish, stubborn husband into submission. I did not sit down. I walked to the edge of the table and placed the thick folder of documents directly in front of Marcus. I didn't raise my voice. I simply let the undeniable evidence of his ruin spill out onto the polished wood, the SCT subpoena. The shadow ledgers, the forged second mortgage agreement, the digital trail of the $80,000 Eleanor had stolen from my retirement. The silence in the room stretched out, heavy and suffocating. Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as she realized her brother was not just in debt, but facing a massive federal wire fraud indictment. Eleanor turned pale, her eyes darting frantically between me and the printed bank statements proving her embezzlement. But Marcus did not panic. Incredibly, he began to laugh. It was a deep, resonant chuckle that bounced harshly off the cold glass walls. He leaned back in his leather chair, shaking his head as if he were simply dealing with a stubborn, confused child. He wiped a tear of amusement from his eye. "You think any of this matters, Arthur?" Marcus sneered, his voice dripping with arrogant confidence. He reached out and tapped his index finger aggressively against the pristine transfer deed resting in the middle of the table. "You think the SE cares about a few fabricated ledgers if I write them a check for $3 million? Sign the deed, Dad. I liquidate the timber estate next week. The feds get their money. Vance gets his business loans paid, and this entire ugly mess just disappears." He honestly believed money was the ultimate eraser of his sins. He thought sheer financial mass could crush federal law. I didn't say a word. I simply looked at Victor Thorne. The corporate litigator had been standing perfectly still, letting Marcus dig his own grave. Now Thorne smiled. It was a cold, surgical, terrifying smile. He reached across the table and picked up the transfer deed. He held the heavy bond paper up to the fluorescent light, casually inspecting the flawless formatting and the gold notary seal at the bottom. "It is a beautifully drafted document, Marcus," Thorne murmured, his baritone voice smooth as glass. "Truly, but it is completely worthless." Without breaking eye contact, Thorne placed his hands on the top edge of the deed and deliberately ripped it completely in half. The sharp, violent tearing sound echoed loudly in the silent room. Marcus jumped out of his chair, his face flushing a dangerous, mottled red. He slammed his fists down on the table, screaming that destroying a legal document was a crime. Thorne dropped the torn pieces onto the floor. "In real estate law, Marcus, you cannot transfer a property you do not own. Your father has not owned the 500-acre timber estate for 5 years." The blood completely drained from Marcus's face. He slumped back into his chair, the breath knocked entirely out of his lungs. "5 years ago," Thorne continued, his voice absolutely lethal, "Elias came to my office. He wanted to ensure his legacy could never be liquidated to pay off gambling debts, failed business ventures, or federal fraud indictments. He legally transferred the entire estate into an irrevocable blind trust. The transfer was permanent, it cannot be undone, and most importantly, it cannot be seized by federal creditors." Eleanor began to tremble violently. Her hands shook as she clutched the edge of the table. "Who controls the trust?" she stammered, desperate for a loophole. "Who has the authority to sell?" I looked at the woman who had traded our 38-year marriage to save a criminal. I kept my tone perfectly flat. "An irrevocable trust requires a sole trustee," I told her. "A person with a spotless financial background. Someone who understands complex accounting and cannot be manipulated by family pressure. I am the sole trustee, Eleanor. I control every single pine needle on those 500 acres, and I will never sell an inch of it to save you." The reality of my words settled over the boardroom like a concrete slab. The millions of dollars Marcus desperately needed had just evaporated into thin air. He was a ruined man sitting at a polished table with absolutely zero leverage. Thorne reached into his briefcase one final time. My office forwarded the dashcam video of Vance's criminal intimidation, along with the absolute proof of your fraudulent medical hold, directly to the district attorney this morning. You are not just facing the SE key anymore. You are facing state prosecutors for elder abuse and felony conspiracy. Vance turned completely white. He looked at Marcus, pure hatred burning in his eyes. He realized he was going to prison for a man who had just lost everything. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a thick white envelope. I slid it across the table until it touched Eleanor's trembling fingers. "Those are formal divorce papers," I said quietly. "Attached is a civil lawsuit. I am suing you to reclaim the $80,000 you embezzled, and I am pressing charges for the forged signature on the second mortgage. You sacrificed our marriage for a criminal, and you are leaving with nothing." Eleanor let out a broken, agonizing sob. She buried her face in her hands, the sound of her weeping filling the cold room. The fragile alliance between the siblings violently shattered. Vance lunged across the table, grabbing Marcus by the lapels of his bespoke suit, screaming that Marcus had destroyed his life. Clara shrieked, pulling at her husband's coat. Marcus swung wildly, blaming Clara for letting their father fall, threatening to tell the prosecutors exactly what she did. The boardroom descended into absolute, primal chaos. They were drowning, violently pulling each other under the water to save themselves. I didn't stay to watch the rest of the bloodbath. I offered my arm to Elias. The old man didn't look at the screaming people on the other side of the room. He simply took my arm, leaned his weight onto his cane, and turned his back on them forever. We walked out of the glass boardroom, the heavy doors shutting behind us, instantly muffling the sounds of their destruction. We took the elevator down to the lobby in total silence. Stepping out into the Seattle morning, the rain had finally stopped. The air smelled of wet asphalt and fresh pine, clean and piercingly cold. Elias looked at me, a small, genuine smile touching the corners of his bruised mouth. "Do you think we could find a quiet place for some clam chowder, Arthur?" I smiled back. "I know exactly the place." We are often taught that family is an unbreakable bond, forged by blood and shared history. We are conditioned to forgive endlessly, to look the other way when boundaries are violently crossed, just to keep the peace. But blood simply makes you relatives. Loyalty, respect, and genuine care make you a family. When the people you love look at you and only see a resource to be exploited, the illusion shatters. You realize that continuing to support them is not an act of love. It is an act of total self-destruction. Marcus and Eleanor believed a timber estate could erase their moral bankruptcy. They traded their freedom, their marriages, and their father for a piece of paper that turned out to be completely worthless. True wealth is not found in an irrevocable trust. It is found in the ability to sleep soundly at night, knowing you never had to destroy someone else to save yourself. Walking away from the wreckage of a toxic family is an agonizing grief, but when the smoke finally clears, the silence left behind is not empty. It is filled with the incredible, quiet peace of finally being free. If you have ever had to walk away from toxic family members to protect your own peace and dignity, please share your story in the comments below. And do not forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice and survival.